Welcome to Adesoji Speaks channel. And your usual conversation here is women and resistance. This week's episode will take a, a slight turn, but all the same, it's just to further enhance what we have done so far. And by that, I mean we're going to have a deep Afrocentric conversation highlighting 10 iconic women from the African continent and diaspora who lived exemplify, whose lives has exemplified resistance to racial, colonial, patriarchal, and economic oppression. But this time we're going to use a particular framework called the Africana Studies Framework and looking at these women's contribution through what is known as the conceptual categories. This episode unearths how each woman's legacy answers the central guiding question, which is, how do it free us? And that quote comes from a poem by Sonia Sanchez. But before further ado, I like to welcome my sister from another mother, um, Sister Aya Fubara Eneli Esq. How are you doing, sis?
You with this Esquire. I am doing great. It's been it's been an incredible day. We're grateful to be here. It's also, I believe, Emancipation Day in DC. I think I saw earlier some events that were happening around along that moment in time
Mm,
when the United States government bought back enslaved Africans to basically pay their white enslavers and
mm.
then, quote unquote, set them free. So supposedly it was for a good cause, but it was really also to compensate these people. But anyway, I'm glad to be here and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, again, we've decided to bring together all these women into a roundtable in order to understand what it is about them that contributes to our story and which has been one of resistance. So, just a quick rundown of the women we've looked at earlier. We started with, and in no particular order, by the way. So, we looked at the lives and times of Billie Holiday,
Mm-hmm.
Miriam Makeba,
Mm-hmm.
Satima Clark, Lauren Hansberry, Claudia Jones, Queen Nanny of the Maroons, Olufunmilayo Ransom Kuti, Maria Jean Lametiere, Wangari Maathai, and Al Kuten. Now, the lives of these women stretch over the arc of time. So you're looking from apartheid, from the hills of Jamaica, Jim Crow, and the transatlantic slave trade. So we have gathered over that period of 10 weeks that their lives has been some sort of instruction to us in terms of how we view ourselves in the grand scheme of things. So the first question would be, looking through the the, the question of social structure and how do the larger societies view these women, what would be your take?
Wow. How did the largest, well, certainly they were problematic.
Mm-hmm.
If I just go down the list,
Yeah.
I don't think there was anyone that was beloved of of the status quo. Aquiltune, from the early 1600s,
Mm-hmm.
leading the Battle of Mbuila, fighting against the Portuguese. She was definitely considered a problem, which is why she was sold and treated as brutally as she was. But then, of course, continued that fight. Nani of the Maroons, same thing, definitely viewed as a thorn in the flesh
Correct.
of the British, of the oppressors. Um, Marie-Jean Lamartiniere, probably thinking, okay, she could just be like a concubine, femme fatale, whatever, and she was really fatal. Um, but
Yeah,
again,
very fatal.
um, probably viewed as something that could be used. I think all of
Mm,
these women that we've mentioned so far, but who would not allow their wills to be broken. Um, Septima Clark was definitely viewed as a problem.
mhm.
And with her work at the Highland School, which eventually was moved onto under the civil rights, a civil rights organization in that sense. But she was definitely considered problematic. Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, we know, was considered problematic,
Deeply problematic.
and
Yep.
Billie Holiday was followed by the CIA and FBI, and Claudia Jones, and then deported. And Lauren Hansberry also had her folder, although she died before they could do anything about it. And Miriam Makeba. So yes, what you see in every single one of these 10 women, every single one of them,
Mhm.
Wangari Maathai as well, imprisoned multiple times, is that women who resist are not beloved by the social structure. And that social structure doesn't always have to mean quote unquote outsiders.
Mm,
That social structure can also be people who look like you, come from where you are, but who have imbibed a certain ideology where they feel like you are standing in the way of whatever power they are seeking to achieve, or getting getting rid of you and will cause them to be more, what would I say, beloved by their oppressor, and so
yeah.
you become a bargaining chip, if you will. So yeah, none of these women were embraced by
Oh,
social structure. Even when you look at Lauren Hansberry with all the awards that she won, um of
he was
course
still
we know she was
considered an
under, yeah,
outsider.
she was still considered an outsider. She was under surveillance, and the
Mhm.
question is how long that would have lasted if she didn't die, because
Mm.
Paul Robeson at one point was beloved, but they can turn on you like that once you step out of line, so to speak. So yeah.
Okay. So now we're still looking at social structure. The question is, would would it be right to think these women sought some sort of respite within the social structure, in that in order for us to know who they are, they had to come and interface with social structure? I'll give you an example. In the case of Maria Makeba,
Mhm.
when she started singing, initially she wanted to, uh, what's the word? Exist, but exist within a structure that was not created by her people, but she sought acceptance in it. But it was only when she realized the power of the stage she was on did she decide, you know what, I'm going to use this to call certain things to question. So, would you say some of them try to engage, or from the onset, it was resistance?
My read on, and we'll probably have to like take each person, so I'm not
Mm, mm,
overgeneralizing, but my read would be that there's a book called Forced into Glory. My read would be that many of us are forced into glory.
mm.
Many of our of the warriors, as we look in our history, were forced into glory. That it wasn't like someone woke up and was just like, yeah,
I'm going to
I
be.
want, because it comes at a great personal sacrifice. I mean, some of them lost their lives. So I don't think that most people have that sense of, I'm 2 years old. Yes, I want to throw myself at the feet of someone and fight for people who may even reject me. Um, I don't think that that was the case. So if we look at Miriam Makeba, since you brought her name, born in apartheid, South
South
Africa,
Africa.
watching just the hell that they were living through, but still trying to use her voice,
Mhm.
really initially just to sing, because she said she didn't even realize you could get paid to sing. And then when she realized, oh, they'll pay me to sing. Oh, okay. So I don't think at that point she was thinking, oh, I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be this exile. I'm going to be Mama Africa. I
You
don't think
got,
she
yeah.
was dreaming along those lines at all. But when that
Opportunity
American came
presented
in,
itself. Yeah.
yes, and did the documentary, and the opportunity presented itself for her to leave the country. And even then, she wasn't thinking, I'm leaving and never coming back.
Mm,
She was
mm,
just going for an opportunity and to spread her wings. And then she was planning to come back, and then found out, oh, I've been barred. I can never come back under this regime anyway. So at that point, it's like, well, what do? Your back is up against the wall, and these people do not understand peace. You
mm.
don't win with peace with them. So you
Yep.
got to fight. And then the question is, then what do I fight with? Because it's either I lay down and die,
Mm,
or I fight to live. And I fight not just for my life, I fight for future generations. So, Wangari Maathai was looking to make a career as a professor. And then she starts noticing certain things, and then she starts trying to be a problem solver in that realm. I don't think that she imagined that she would spend as many days as she did in jail, that she would become the face of resistance in the way that she did, or that she would lead a movement, the Green Belt movement, planting over 50 million trees. So I think a lot of these women, and I think that's instructive for all of us, you don't go pursuing, oh, I'm a revolutionary, I'm a revolutionary in my mind. Because it's almost like a suicide pact right there,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because this system is gonna come for you.
Correct.
Nobody really, I think, just goes and seeks pain unnecessarily. I
Mm,
think you come to a point where you're like, the pain of staying quiet and acquiescing to you and knowing you will still kill me is worse than the pain of me fighting. And at least if I die on my feet. And I think
mm,
that's where many of those women came to. I mean, you think Billie Holiday initially thought she was trying to be any kind of civil rights, whatever? No, she was dealing with a lot of crap. She hears a song, it resonates with her. She was in the South where she couldn't go in and eat with the people she was traveling with, and all the
with, yeah.
indignities she suffered and all. And it's like, I'm gonna sing this song. F y'all. Um,
And the name of that song was
Strange Fruits.
Strange Fruit. So speaking of the people you travel with, which brings us obviously to the cocoon of what we will consider to be the governance structure,
Mm,
our people.
mm.
How do you think we saw this set of women, and possibly the next set of women we'll be looking at? But in generally, how do you think we saw them or we engaged with them? Because they were not all engaged with
When
in
you say
tandem.
when you say we, who are you referring to as we?
I'm referring to the people they represented. So
Okay.
in the case of, say, in the case of Aquitaine now, that would be the people that she fought with. In the
Hmm.
case of Maria Makeba, it would be singing the problems of South Africa, putting that on the stage. With Septima Clark, it would be teaching people how to read. With Claudia Jones, it was organizing people on the basis of. So I'm just trying to build an idea of what each of them represented to those people, and the people they represented. Did they engage with them? Yeah,
Who were
yeah,
they to the people that they represented?
yeah.
They were many different things, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what's so complicated about life, right?
Mm.
So on the one hand, in the documentary with Miriam Makeba, there was a gentleman that she initially sang with, or she sang background for their group or something. And when he saw her, in Europe, and she said, oh, she was going on this tour, and we thought for sure she would advocate for us to be her backup singers, but instead it was actually a group of white men who were her backup singers. And you could tell from his commentary that he felt like, wow, I can't believe you didn't fight for me. So I just give that as an example to say that when you're not in that person's role, it's
Mm.
difficult to understand all the different pressures and all the different things that impact their decision making. And so when you ask how did we, who were they to us, then it depends on the vantage point of that person. So
Mm.
again, let me use hmm let me use Miriam Makeba. She was obviously a daughter to her mother. She was a sibling. She was a mother to her child. When she left her child with her mother. At that point, could her mother have been resentful? Could her daughter been resentful? Could some of the girls that she sang with in her girl band been resentful and at the same time incredibly proud of her?
Mm.
Incredibly like, oh my goodness, look at how far she's come, but still resentful that wow, you left us behind or you didn't take us with her. So it's complicated. So I would say that in every instance, let's use Mary Jean as an example again. Um, Clearly, from all indications, she was absolutely stunning. So I can see with the issues between the Africans and the mulattoes at that point, I can see some people feeling, who does she think she is? And she's not one of us or whatever. And some other people saying, oh my God, I love her. Even though she has this elevated status because of her color, she still is humble and interacts with everybody. So some people would have loved her. Some people would have tried to prove that she's not who she's acting like she is. And those are
Mm.
all the complexities that you see. Wangari Maathai, there were women who supported her, and there were other women who were like, "You're
She's a
fighting for
troublemaker.
what? Equal rights for what? You're a troublemaker, and you're not going to spoil my family. You're not going to tarnish my image." And so she talked about people whom she knew
Mm.
walking on the other side so that they would not have to say hello to her.
Mm.
So, who are we to each other? It's very complicated. We are beloved, we are protected because obviously there were people who fought with each of these women side by side, people who protected them, people who took care of them, people they took care of. But at the same time, there were also people who were, who do you think you are? And let's take you down a notch or two. And so we see them
In the case
showing
of
up as
Billie Holiday.
warriors. Yeah, and showing up as warriors on multiple levels.
Mm.
So Billie Holiday didn't have a man she could trust. But then you can also say, her mother was so important to her, but her mother also let her down at a time when she wanted help. But then you can say maybe her mother was giving tough love. So I don't think there's one answer in terms of who are we to each other. And I think that that's instructive too for those of us who want to be in this area of pursuing justice, is that you may think because you are fighting for your people that automatically will make you a hero or heroine of your people. That might not be the case. You might have to die before anybody celebrates you. um when the civil rights movement was at its height, there were
Mm.
communities that would say to Martin Luther King, don't come here because you bring trouble. Definitely they didn't want Malcolm X there because
Definitely. Yeah.
so yeah, so you see it throughout history that you will be embraced by some,
Mhm.
you will be reviled and betrayed by others, and when you die, then we might embrace you if we remember you at all.
Mm. Speaking of remembering, I'm going to go to uh, a question which is prompted by the next category, which is ways of knowing and system of thought. Using, I mean, you could use any of the experiences of the 10 women, anyone that comes to your mind, but I'm just going to cite this person. Using Maria Makeba when she said, every time I sing, I'm singing the pain of my people.
Mm,
Or Septima Clark, who decides education is power.
mm,
Would you say, in their case, Maria Makeba, the singing, and Septima Clark teaching people how to read, was reading the end in itself, or was the means to preserving the stories of their people? And in the singing, was that just a means to an end, or was it a way of preserving the memory of their people as a way of knowing that this is what we do? And you could, songs of love with Septima Clark. It's come, let's teach you how to read so that you can go out to teach others.
So I think, as we covered before, when we talk about ways of knowing, with
Mm,
each of these women, they use the tools that were at their disposal. Um, and I would say definitely something that you said earlier. You said something about a cocoon, and I was thinking, as you said that there's a certain cocoon in which warriors and resistors at some point in their lives live.
mm,
Otherwise, they can't be warriors and resistors. I think that that is a governance cocoon. I think it's a place where you learn about who you are on some level,
mhm,
and you understand that you have agency.
mhm,
And so at that point, it's really tapping into the various lessons that you have learned
mhm,
to bring about the common goal of liberation, of self autonomy. I think that's what we always pursued, whether we were using Marxism or music or writing a poem or whatever. It was about that self determination, that self autonomy. And so when you look at Wangari Maathai, it's these women can feed. The children are malnutrition. They're working, but the soil is being swept away. They can't get access to clean water. The trees can solve all of this. The goal was liberation. It was getting back to a place where we were self-sustaining.
mm.
If we look at I'm trying to go through my head now. All that. If we look at Claudia Jones' family came here looking for liberation, looking for a place where they could carve out a certain amount of autonomy. Had there not been the crash in their hometown, they probably would not have left their country to come to New York. Having
Correct.
come here, they're looking for a way to make a life, to be liberated. They're wanting their children to go to school. The mother is working in these sweatshops with the heart condition and so on and so forth. But ultimately, everything Claudia did was to carve out a space of autonomy, to
Mm,
have a voice for our liberation. She just used her writing and her speaking voice to try and make that happen. Billie Holiday used her writing because she wrote music as well, and she used her voice as well. Um, some people fought, but
yep.
then we see all of these women, particularly the further back we go, using the earth, using lessons they had learned about plants, about observation, about how human beings, to be a warrior and to be able to strategize, you had to have picked up a way of being, a way of knowing at some point. So people who grew up outside of a certain governance cocoon are probably most likely going to be your sellouts. they're,
Mm,
they're gonna they're gonna be the ones who are just looking out for themselves. They're the ones who are imbibing individual power as opposed to collective power. And
mm,
so, in terms of looking at ways of knowing and systems of thought, I would think that these are the people who, at some point in their development, it was imprinted on their minds, in their
mm.
hearts, in their spirits, that we are not slaves. We might be enslaved,
Slaved.
but
Yep.
it is up to us to change that condition. That we might be in a place of poverty, but it's up to us to change that condition and not just say, well, this is how it is. So, I'm just going to do whatever Massa says and just try to be the head Negro in charge. That's about as high as I can get.
Mm,
That
mm.
would be my take on it. What's your take on it?
So I'm minded to go along with what you're saying in terms of when Mariam Makeba, I'll use the example of Mariam Makeba for now. When she said, I sing the pains of my people, that's observing that pain and knowing that every time they want to either celebrate, reflect, it's couch in song. And like you said earlier, I didn't know I could get paid to sing. because for them, singing was a way of life. It was a practice. It was it was what they did. In
So,
the
imperialists have a different kind of mindset. Everything is a commodity. Everything is for
mhm,
sale.
commodified, yeah.
Everything, yes, everything is despiritualized. What
Mm,
I would say about ways of knowing for these warrior women is that somehow in their development there was an understanding of a spirit that goes beyond this physical body. So you
yeah.
can beat this physical body, you might even kill it, but I stand for something beyond whatever it is you think you can offer me.
Mm,
And that's the thing that propels me and allows me to fight. That's the thing that allows me to put my head on the proverbial chopping block because
block,
I
yeah.
know they're after me. I know I could have gone an easier route, or what they would claim is an easier route, but it would have been a route that would have worried my spirit
Mm,
because I would not be living up to who I could be. So there are definitely systems of thought, but again, like seeds, I think they have to have they have to be planted, and they have to be incubated or grown in the right soil,
yeah.
and that governance structure is that soil.
Hmm. I mean, you're talking about, wanting to follow a different route, knowing fully well your spirit might be troubled, which reminds me of the case of Funmilayo Ransome Kuti. She was born into a well-to-do family, but decided the way the imperialists were moving around her was not. And when the women who used to come to her for advice, confided in them that, do you know what? We would love to read. You want to do what? Read. Because I travel, make money, but yet I don't know what is going around me. So imagine somebody confiding with you that I want to do what the average person does. Well, not average at that time, but for women at that time, it was something of substance. I just want to read. She was part of a more cultured club, decided that culture status was not for her, and decided to follow another route. So it comes back to this idea that just because you're comfortable now doesn't mean that's the trajectory for you. It just means maybe your calling hasn't arrived yet. What do you think?
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. As you were talking about Fumilaya Ransom Kuti, the the signs were there. I mean, to the extent that she had to have had a certain spirit about her to be the first girl to
Go
break the
to a boys'
gender
school.
barrier
Yeah,
for that school. You know, if you had a child who was a little bit more, I don't want to say weak, you know, in terms
timid.
of their personality, more
Hmm.
timid, you probably would not have put her in that position. So she was given that opportunity because there was something about her that said she can make it, and of course she did. What I'm seeing as a commonality between all of these women again is, regardless of what level of comfort they initially had, because Aquatune was a princess,
Yeah.
it's understanding that it's not about your personal fortune or comfort. It is about what the masses of people around you are experiencing. Because Fumilaya Ransom Kuti could have lived a very comfortable life. Mariam Makabeb, as a matter of fact, could have as well. If she just came here and sang and looked beautiful and entertained and did the click song and all of that, and didn't go and marry
Kwame Ture.
Kwame Ture, or even sing the appetite songs that she sang that got her country upset. I mean, she could have sang songs that made them feel good, and they would have been like, "Oh, look at the exports from our country," just like some African American artists were exports from in the
Mm.
U.S.
Yep.
to
To the
quote unquote
Congo.
ambassadors to other places. So I think each of these women at some point made a decision that it was not about individual achievement, personal success, which is what we teach now in the Western world. I guess, which is what they've always taught. It's about collective success,
Mm,
collective liberation. And so they were willing to put their bodies on the line. Every single one of them, every single one of them could have made a different choice.
mm.
Claudia Jones could have made a different choice and still have stayed in the United States of America. Um,
Billie
Billie
Holiday.
Holiday certainly could have stopped singing that song and
Yeah.
just, entertained and left it at that.
Lauren Hansberry
Lauren Hansberry.
with Raisin in the
Lauren
Sun.
Hansberry could have just stayed with her family's estate and made money off of all the rentals and stuff, and had a very comfortable, soft life.
Mm,
She decided to go off to New York and work hard and speak up in the ways that she did, including writing a play that kind of points a
well,
finger at her own family in
yeah.
terms of their choices. So in every instance, these are women who decided it's not just about me. And because they made that decision, their legacy lives on.
Mm, mm. So, speaking of legacy, one thing that tends to uh, prolong a legacy is science and technology. So, the question would be, what would you consider ideas in most of these women that ended up being a way to develop not just themselves, but the people around them, but and also, created what would then become their natural environment. I'll give you a case in point. What's her name? Wangari Maathai
Hmm.
came back, having grown up in Kenya. Notice, you remember the story her mother told her about the tree. Don't
Hmm.
cut this tree. You cut this tree, you're gonna destroy the ecosystem. That formed the bedrock of the Green Belt movement. That story she got as a 6 year old
Yeah.
formed the bedrock of a movement that ended up planting 50 million trees. The same can be said of Lauren Hansberry. She saw her immediate surrounding, decided, well, this doesn't look quite the way it should. Instead of just standing up against it, she wrote a play. That play ended up making her a household name. Same with Billie Holiday. Singing that song, Strange Fruit, meant you and I are talking about her today. That's technology put to use, the sound. And we're effectively just saying, you know what? That's their legacy. So, what would you say were the legacies of the others?
Oh, wow. Well, we know that for better or for worse, the people who taught the Europeans how to fight camouflage wars were us,
Yeah, Nanny of
understanding
Maroons. Yeah.
our relationship with nature and how you can blend in with nature, how you can walk in nature and not disturb the other living things. You don't have to come in and bulldoze and knock down and kill off everything. um how to nourish yourself from the ground. So, there's also the story about the pumpkin seeds and how she was able to use the pumpkin seeds to then feed her people. But then also even the ingenuity of habanero peppers as nerve gas,
Mm,
or other plants that will cause you to feel like you're hallucinating, that will cause you to be like disconcerted and not sure of where you are, discombobulated, if you will, or whatever. And so this was all science and
and technology.
technology and ways
Yep.
of knowing
Mm,
that. I was thinking the other day, because I have chicken, and if I let those chicken out at let's say midday, whatever, they will stay out the entire day. Now, when it gets hot, they will know instinctively go and find shady areas, right?
mm-hmm,
They're
mm-hmm,
chicken. Their brains are like this small,
mm-hmm.
but they instinctively know I need to find shelter.
Jolta.
And when it gets dark, all of them find their way back to their coop
Mm.
without anybody calling them, no physical alarm that I know of. All of them just start, they come out from wherever they were taking shelter from this hot sun, and they just make their way back in. If chicken, if animals, if plants know to grow towards the sun,
The sun.
if roots know to keep going until they find the sustenance they need,
Mm.
of course, when it comes to human beings and when it comes to Africans, there is an inbuilt genetic knowledge of science, knowledge of your environment, knowledge of how to move within your environment. Where we have lost it is because of the times that it's been cut off,
Mm.
where we no longer know what it feels like to walk on grass because we always have shoes,
Choose.
where we now have to take vitamin D in from a bottle because we've forgotten how to be out in the sun, where we have forgotten the natural rhythms of the body, that there's a time the body does go to sleep and there's a time it starts to wake up. But with technology now, and you can put lights and all kinds of stuff on 24/7, your body has actually even forgotten the rhythm of what it needs to sustain itself. So when we
Mm.
talk about science and the ways of knowing, if we get quiet, just like we saw during COVID, the world stopped for a while and the animals showed up, the birds showed up, the vegetation. I mean, we got quieter. Now, some of us now didn't know what to do with the quiet. And so then other issues started to arise and all of that.
Mm.
But I guess what I'm saying with all of these women is that there was a spiritual connection
Mm.
to nature, to understanding how to live in harmony. When we talk about science, science for me is also, there's a spiritual component to all of that, or maybe there's a scientific component to spirituality, but it's knowing how to look up in the sky and understand what the movements are,
Mm.
and then being quiet enough and humble enough to then heed what, first quiet enough to observe it, then when you observe it, it's like you're able to process it, and then you're humble enough to actually move with it.
Accordingly.
And
Yeah.
one of the things these women were good at was helping to bring other people along in that way of being, in that way of knowing,
Mm.
in embracing that science that otherwise people might have felt, this is crazy, what are you even doing?
Mm. Mm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but as I
No,
look
no,
at
no.
all
I
of
mean,
them,
it feeds in. It feeds into it. It feeds into it, and actually, which moves us forward. When it comes to the next category, which is movement and memory, you said the idea of us being quiet
mm,
to understand, to study our environment, to be able to engage, that we do certain things this way. I mean, the Yorubas have a saying, "Ashebotin shekole ribotin ri," which is we do it the way the elders have always done it so that it turns out the way it should. There's a reason why the cockerel will wake up long before we even see the sun
mm-hmm,
and will start
crowing,
crowing.
mm-hmm,
But yet we don't see the sun.
mm-hmm,
Now, the question is, we as a people, and looking at the roles these women played in our lives, what is it about them that meant they were able to conserve their memory, their movements, and put that their memories and put that into the movements going forward?
ask
Let
the
me
question again. Yeah,
let,
clarify.
let me clarify. So, what was it about the women we've studied so far? Claudia Jones, Maria Makeba, Akuten, uh, Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, that was part of their memory, which is In the case of Fumla Ransom Kuti, it was organizing women.
Mm-hmm.
Akojo Olafin Soya, which is the coming together of the hands, means you're able to do lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
With Akutin, it was that I was a princess. I led before,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm leading again.
Mm-hmm.
With Maria Makeba, we used to sing. We sang our pain, we sang our joy, and now I'm singing again. So, in the lives of the other women, what is it about them that formed the nucleus of their actions as we know them today? Uh, Lamatier, wife of a general, she didn't just sit at home knitting jackets. She went on the field to fight.
So you're looking at what they did in the context of the memory that led to their movements, to their
Yes,
choices.
yeah, because they didn't just come into doing what they did because it was impulsive. They
Yeah,
lent
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So when I look at Septima Clark, for instance, um, her life work came out of her experiences.
Mhm,
Being the daughter of someone who had been enslaved,
mhm,
and being the daughter of a mother who had learned to read in Haiti, and her mother being very bougie in the sense of, oh, my children are going to be knowledgeable. You are not just going to be a field hand. Definitely impacted, influenced the education she received
mhm,
and the importance that she put on education.
mhm.
So it just makes sense that within that context, and then growing up, doing everything you were supposed to do, and then finding out that you are not allowed to teach
Mm.
in your area because you are black.
Black.
So those are the kind of experiences that first you were again you were formed in a certain governance structure. So in her case, it's this very proud woman who was raised in Haiti, who maybe kind of looked down on her husband because he was more rough around the edges. um and then you are aspiring to this role that you can play, and you do your part, and then find out that there's this racial barrier that has been thrown in your way. So what
Mm.
do? Do you go and be a servant somewhere, like her father, who took the master's children on a horse to
Oh,
school every day
and
and just
sat
sat
there.
outside and didn't do anything until they were done? I mean, when she tells those stories, there are very specific reasons why those are the stories that she remembers, that were imprinted on her memory.
Mm.
And so you can see her saying, no, like, I'm going to teach, I'm going to do something with this education. So she leaves, but then she comes back and she, starts this fight, if you will. And then finding out about the Highland School, and oh, wait a second, there is a place that
They
believes
stop. Yeah.
differently,
Mhm,
and I can actually learn, interact, and then have some resources to help my people more. You can see how her activism, based on what she had experienced, was a natural progression. Now,
mhm.
there were other people who may have gotten the education that she got, but because they did not have that same governance kind of structure or sense of self,
Mhm,
they just, like she said, when they said, hey, if you say you are part of the NAACP, we're going to ostracize you and all of that. Many of the other black educators did not admit to being members of the NAACP, but she's like, nah, I'm going to stand up.
mhm.
So many of us have these opportunities to step into
Our
greatness.
purpose. Yeah.
Yes, the issue is that greatness is not what we think it is. I'm wearing the nice suit or this or that. It really looks like service. I think it was Martin Luther King that said that, some of us miss our greatness because it comes dressed up in overalls or something like that. And so we are afraid to step out, we're afraid to take a chance, we're
Mm.
afraid to take that risk, and we lose our opportunity. And again, that's not even the mindset of these women, to be great. They didn't set out to be great, they set out to fight for liberation. They were actually struggling to live and create avenues for others to live. So when we look at Septima Clark, if we look at Claudia Jones,
Mm-hmm.
Claudia Jones, she could have just kept quiet, stayed married to the Jewish man or whomever, and tried to play it safe. Lauren Hansberry could have done that actually, because not only did she have the money from her family, when her husband also came into money from selling the songs, she could have just been a pretty woman. She was very pretty, just entertained people and ended at that. Who else did we cover that I haven't mentioned really quickly here? So, the long story short is when we talk about movement and memory, with each of these women, I see the memory from their childhood
Mm-hmm.
and I see how that directs their movement
Movements. Yeah.
in adolescence and beyond. So,
Mm.
Aquatena, you see, she was trained to lead.
Yes.
Nani was trained to
Trained
lead.
to
She,
lead.
as a spiritual leader, she had to have sat under somebody and been initiated and learned certain crafts. Um, Marie Jean Lamentier was also trained,
Trained.
trained both from her white father, and she got to experience and see certain things that quote unquote the darker skinned enslaved
Mm-hmm.
people didn't see, but also she was humble enough to learn what she needed to learn from her own people and everything in between, so she could use a musket as well as
Mm-hmm.
a man,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she could also use her womanly wiles. And so every single one of these women, which is a lesson to all of us who are parents or who will be grandparents or who even have a chance to mentor or influence youth. Someone plants a seed,
Yeah.
someone protects that seed, and under the right circumstances and with enough courage, that seed goes out and produces in a way that allows us to talk about them today.
Mm.
Um, Miriam Makeba, her mother was a sangoma. Her mother singing those songs to her.
Mm.
There was a certain way of knowing that she was raised in. And so other people may have come out and not had the same influence because she was Mariam Makeba. Who else am I missing that I haven't touched on as we just talk about that piece? I'm going off the top
We
of my head for all of the
we've
women we covered.
we've done Septima Clark, we've done Lorraine Hansberry, we've done
Same thing with Wangari, you mentioned
Wangari
again
Maathai.
that
Yeah.
story that her mother told her, You're
Mm-hmm.
collecting firewood, but leave that tree alone. That's where we find God, so to speak."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we see that Fumilayo, again, her parents nurturing something within her. Not only do you go to the school and break that gender barrier, now you are going overseas to study, which was the same thing with Wangari Maathai as well. Her brother saying, "Hey, why is my sister not going to school?" And then she goes and she excels so much, and then it opens other doors for her. But in each case, these were women who were propelled
Nurtured.
by the memories of what had been
Yeah.
inculcated in them, if you will. So even when you think your children aren't listening, I guess I'm saying this for myself to give myself hope. Even when you think your children aren't listening, just keep planting those seeds, because you never
so
know.
so um the first before the last, then conceptual category would be cultural meaning making. I mean, we've talked about the song, we've talked about the dance, we've talked about the writing. What was it about this women in terms of their narrative that will endure?
Oh, everything, sense of style. Every single one of these women, even the ones that we're not quite sure what their pictures are. They showed up in a certain way. I mean, they had a presence about them. Whether you talk about Lorraine's, pixie cut, and did she, the cigarette hanging from
Mm.
her lips,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
or Claudia, who was always impeccably dressed,
Dressed, yeah.
even when she was poverty stricken. They talked about how statuesque she was and how striking she was. Um, to Wangari Maathai, who also held her own. Now there was a period where she got into some kind of look that I didn't quite understand. But for the most part, every I'm not, except for when she was younger and when she
Mhm.
was known as Mary Jo, I don't recall seeing her in anything that did not look like African inspired attire.
Yeah.
And so even choosing that is a statement that is tied to cultural meaning
Mini
making.
making.
The
Yeah.
way they spoke, choosing their we all know people who've traveled outside of their countries, and then they take on these airs and take on these fake accents and all of that. And so at least for the women for whom we have recordings of their voices, you could tell they were black women. They
Yeah.
were not so affected that they put on airs beyond um and I hope no one is hearing this wrong, but they found their strength in who they were. They
They
did
were.
not
Yeah.
have to become someone else. And so when we talk about cultural meaning making, it showed up in every way. You look at Miriam Makeba, even when she wore the European gowns, and then she would have a scarf over her bare shoulder,
Shoulder. Yeah.
or what she did with her
Her
hair,
hair.
or the fact that she would still sing in her language when she could have abandoned that and sang in English and French and everything else. And so every single one of these women was not afraid to embrace who they were in
Mm.
whatever that culture was, and not to feel like they had to be
Acquiesce to
absorbed.
every aspect of
Yes,
it. Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
And we certainly see it with their hair for most of them. Yes, Claudia had a perm, and so did Lorraine. That was a time. But just in terms of how they presented, and of course what they wrote about was tied to their culture.
Mm.
Now Lorraine did eventually write some other things, um, but when you look at the music, the art, when you look at what um what still prevails in Haiti in terms of culture and what we've kept on spiritually, music, dress, food, all of these things show that in each of these women they had that connection to culture, again that
Mm.
sense of self, and they were not afraid to step out into spaces that were otherwise unsafe
Mm.
and be themselves.
Okay. So we started off with the quote from Sonia Sanchez's poem. How does it free us? So I suppose that brings it to a head. The 10
Mhm.
women we've studied so far, what is it about them that we should take forward in our quest for not just freedom, but also to thrive? You could take them as a collective or you could take them individually to say, okay,
Yes, I was thinking about it actually. The song that just came into mind was Chaka Khan, and then Whitney Houston did another rendition of it. I'm Every Woman. These women were not afraid to be mothers. They were also not afraid to say, I don't want to be a
mother.
biological mother.
Mhm.
They were not afraid to take up room in places where they were probably been told to be quiet and
Mhm.
stay behind. They were not afraid to speak up in ways that even threatened the patriarchy. Um, and so they were fighting on multiple fronts, fighting the racism, fighting the poverty, fighting the classism, fighting um, the gender inequality as well, the definitely the patriarchy, the misogyny within our community as well. So I would say that these women, and I think I've mentioned this before as we went through each of them, is that they would have said lessons is that you've got to honor your own humanity. You cannot resign yourself to just being a creation of someone else's imagination, whether that someone else is a white oppressor, whether that someone else is other women who think you're stepping beyond where you should, whether that other, whether that that opposition is coming from a man that you pledge to love. Um, you have to. I would say they would tell us you have to be in tune with yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to be able to walk in the power of who you are, regardless of who applauds you and supports you and who doesn't. Because if
Mm,
you're waiting for applause, if you're waiting for a crowd to follow you, you may miss out on your purpose. And your purpose is tied to our liberation. So just do your part regardless. I think they would say that. I think they would tell us that this liberation work is exhilarating, full of joy, and also laced with a lot of pain and loneliness. But that you have to be able to be so focused on the desired outcome that you deal with everything else as it comes, like that you're not so paralyzed by, oh my god, is this going to happen? It's just like we've got to fight. So when I think of Mary Jean Lamentier on that wall, and she's getting the guys going, and she's giving water, and she's slitting a neck over here, and she's shooting the musket, and it's just like, I'm a target here. I'm a target for any man who might say, who the heck does she think she is? I'm a target for the oppressors out there who are like, who is that woman? Let's get her down. But it's like, I am called to do this, whatever the sacrifice. And
mm.
so, how many of us have that conviction? Septima Clark certainly had that conviction, even as she was dealing with men in the civil rights movement who were, fighting her and fighting, trying to prevent her from being the thing that she had
To,
been trained to be,
to
and
be,
to
yeah.
provide in the, and build up the movement in the way that she could. Um, yeah. So the question is, can we have enough sense of self to be able to get beyond ourselves?
Mm, mm.
I
Well,
think I think there's an ancestral connection that allows you to just say, this is not for accolades, this is not for riches, this is not for fame, this is for my people. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, we're doing our part here. Part of the movement of memory is recording their lives,
Mm-hmm.
looking at it through the lens of time, and also coming up with a synthesis, which is what we've just done in this episode of looking at the collective lives of all these women. There is a common theme there, and the common theme is resistance, and not just resistance for resistance sake, but also through the use of movement and memory, using what they've garnered over time to be the, what's it called, the fulcrum of what it is they're doing. So, um, as usual, we'll tell our audience who we'll be looking at next week.
You have the honors of that.
Yes.
And I
So,
am so excited because again, she used all the tools. So listen, women, men, use all
Mm,
the tools.
mm.
Science and technology, our
Technology.
ways
Yeah.
of knowing all of that, it shows up in so many. You need a machete, you grab it. You need some plants, you grab it. You know, you need a pen, you grab it. You need an instrument, you grab it. Like you need prayer, you grab
Yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah.
whatever it is, put your hands to work. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
put your
So
spirit
next
to work.
week,
Yeah.
we'll be looking at a woman who was not afraid to be a woman. Uh,
No, sir, she wasn't.
cons- yes, considered by the social structure to be Africa's most dangerous woman. Let us sink in. Africa's most dangerous woman. Not only is she a woman, but the most dangerous. And that woman is Madame Adria Bolin.
Andrea
So
Boldini.
next week we'll be looking at and the life and times of Andrea Boleyn, how she resisted, and how she came to be known as Africa's most dangerous woman.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes. Well, for everyone who's been watching, I want to say thank you. I don't know about you. I know I am very energized by these women and their sacrifices and the fact that even though they couldn't see where this was going to lead in the moment, they stayed in the moment and they did what they needed to do in that moment. And that's how I'm being encouraged to live right now, is to just make each moment count, make each day count,
mm,
serve in the ways that I can right here, right now, and you know, let what is to be. And maybe your role is that you birth the person who goes out and does more.
does it.
Who knows?
But you have to
Um,
nurture that
yes,
person.
yes, you
So
do, you do. And I think being in these spaces that we're in, you know, we use the Africana ways of knowing, which most of us have learned under the tutelage of Dr. Carr, who, you know, created these conceptualizations and categories and stuff. You know, all of this is helping us to be in a structure that allows certain things to grow that might otherwise have been killed under the social structure. Question is, how do we now do this for the next generation?
yeah. And yeah, you can share this podcast for starters. And through this podcast, they can gain access to other resources. And speaking of resources, do you have any books that people can engage with?
Oh my goodness. I did not pick out any books for today, but there is a book that I did not share when we did Septima Clark and watch a whole bunch of things come tumbling down. Yep.
Yeah.
But this one,
Oh,
I Dream a World,
a dreamer
and
world.
she's all the way in the back. However, there are so many amazing women in this book. I actually went to the opening at they had it in Columbus when I lived in Columbus, Ohio. You have Althea Gibson, Norma Merrick Sklerick, Toni Morrison, Catherine Dunham, Bertha Gilkey, Eva Jesse. I mean, look at this.
Wow.
So many women of resistance here. But yes, this is Septima Clark on the cover, and I did not mention that when we covered her, but that's the only book besides. Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on. I'll get a couple more if I
And
don't
so
lose
while
it.
she's at it, finding Lorraine, that's the book on Lorraine Hansberry. Uh, I'm thinking off the top of my head, Unbowed.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
Unbowed.
Unbowed.
Yeah, Margaret Maffei. Margaret Maffei, The Challenge for Africa.
Really great book, actually, just in
Yeah,
terms of reading this book in tandem with Aiko Ama's Remembering the Dismembered Continent. We got work to do.
yeah, we got
Um,
work to do. We got work to do. And what's this one?
it's called Replenishing the Earth, Spiritual Values for Healing Ourselves in the World. So when we talk about ways of knowing, when we talk about movement and memory, cultural meaning making, science and technology, like this book kind of gives a sense of where she comes from in all of these ways and the ways that we have allowed a certain understanding of religion to destroy the earth.
Mm,
Let's put it that way. Yeah.
mm. So
So,
yes,
yeah.
um, thank you everyone for coming through. And again, I have to thank my sister from another mother,
Yes, sir.
Sister Aya. And yes, next week we'll be looking at the life and times of a woman considered. I mean, even that title alone is makes her life interesting, and believe you me, it is interesting. So, life and times of Andrea Boleyn, considered Africa's most dangerous woman.
It'll be interesting to see what we did with her.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Well, thank you, brother.
yeah, thank you all for coming through. And until next week, it's good night for now. Good night.
Good night. Sorry, I disconnected.